World War II is known for its brutality, and groups like the SS in particular have become renowned for ruthless cruelty and violence. Less well known, however, are the Ustaše, Croatia's fascist and ultra-nationalist organization who fought with the Axis. Utterly horrific in their actions, the Ustaše often made their SS allies uncomfortable, committing atrocities that even the hardened SS men felt were too much. When the men who orchestrated the Holocaust say you've gone too far, you know what you're doing is truly sickening. This is the story of the Ustaše. Yugoslavia has always been ethnically diverse, as Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosnians, Kars, and others seek to exist alongside one another. After gaining independence from the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of the First World War, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia fought to keep itself together. However, ethno-nationalist groups were a constant threat. One of these was the Ustaše, founded in 1929 and active in terrorist activities throughout the 1930s. When the Axis powers invaded Yugoslavia in 1941, they saw an opportunity in Croatia. They set up the NDH, the Nezavisna Država Hrvatska, or the independent state of Croatia, a puppet fascist state that could do the bidding of its Axis overlords. While the NDH appointed a king, Tomislav II, the real power was concentrated in the Prime Minister, Ante Pavelić, the founder of the Ustaše. Under Pavelić, violence was not simply a tool of the state to suppress opponents, it was a readily available means by which the Ustaše realized their vision of Croatian ultra-nationalist fascism. And this meant mass extermination, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. Pavelić began his program of violence almost immediately. One of his first acts was protecting Croatian national property, which essentially meant any contracts held by Croatian Jews were null and void, and their property could be appropriated by the state. But the Ustaše were not simply focused on property. The next act made immediate execution the penalty for anyone found to be harming national interests. While you might think this meant political sabotage or collaboration with the enemy, in reality, this was often something as simple as being a Jew or a Serb. Historian Jonathan Steinberg paints a grim picture of the killing that took place in 1941. Serbian and Jewish men, women, and children were literally hacked to death, Steinberg said. Whole villages were razed to the ground. There are photographs of Serb women with breasts hacked off by pocket knives, men with eyes gouged out, emasculated, and mutilated. Steinberg also spoke of specifically created weapons designed for the cruel dispatch of victims. There is, in the Italian Foreign Ministry archive, a collection of photographs of the butcher knives, hooks, and axes used to chop up Serbian victims. One of these was the Serb killer, a leather strap around the palm and wrist holding a sickening blade that protruded from its lower side. The Ustaše were motivated by fascism and Croatian nationalism, but also by Roman Catholicism. This meant some potential victims were able to escape their grim fate by accepting the Catholic faith, essentially giving up hundreds of years of culture and history in an act of forced conversion. Jews could become honorary Croats if they converted, while Bosnian Muslims were not considered a threat to the Croatian bloodline and could be tolerated. But anyone considered an enemy of the state, whether Jewish, Serbian, or communist, was put to death. 100,000 had been murdered by the end of 1941 alone. Needless to say, killing on such a scale requires a systematic process of genocide, and this means concentration camps. The Ustaše operated at least 16 concentration camps in the NDH, with another 10 operated by German and Italian forces. By far the largest and most infamous of these was the Jasenovac camp. While Jasenovac represented the Ustaše's systematic killing infrastructure, this infrastructure really just meant getting large numbers of victims together in one place. There were no gas chambers or large sophisticated apparatus of murder. There were simply killing fields in which violence was meted out on a one-on-one basis. Overseen by camp commander Lyubomir Milosh, answering to senior Ustaše Vyacheslav Max Luboric, the camp consisted of workshops, damp and unsanitary accommodation blocks, and killing fields where throats were slit and prisoners were hacked to death. It's alleged that camp guards made bets among themselves as to who could murder the most inmates. A guard named Petar Brzyka boasted he had personally killed 1,360. Another, named Mile Friganovic, said he had killed 1,100, including, allegedly, an elderly Orthodox Serb named Vukasin Mandrapa. Mandrapa had refused to bless Ustaše leader Ante Pavelić and had his ears and nose cut off as a result. After this torture, Friganovic tore the man's heart out. The aim, as with many other Ustaše actions, was to exterminate those believed to be enemies of the Croatian fascist ethno-state. This mainly included Orthodox Serbs, but also Jews and some Roma. While the Ustaše would do their best to cover their tracks, destroying the evidence at Jasenovac, horrifying images of the dead betrayed what had taken place there. These were images of skulls smashed with mallets, of bellies slashed open, the brutal remnants of the Ustaše's grim program of ethnic cleansing. While the Ustaše seemed unstoppable, their position was growing increasingly unstable. From as early as June 1941, the Sisak partisan detachment was formed, representing the first organized resistance against both the Axis invaders and the NDH. The partisan movement swept across Yugoslavia with the communist Josip Broz Tito at its head. This meant that large swaths of the NDH were not under Ustaše control. In fact, the brutality of the Ustaše led many Croats to join up with the partisans, and by 1944, 61% of the partisans operating in Croatia were Croats themselves. Even the Nazis had become disaffected with the brutality of the Ustaše. The Ustaše military chaplain Miroslav Filipović was court-martialed for his involvement in the Shargovac primary school massacre of February 1942, in which 52 children were murdered as part of an ethnic cleansing raid that claimed more than 2,300 lives. By 1944, it was clear that the NDH had backed the wrong side. Ministers Mladen Lorković and Ante Vokić attempted a coup that August, but the coup failed and both were executed. Less than 1 year later, however, Axis and NDH forces were driven out of Yugoslavia by Tito's partisans, backed by the advancing Red Army. The days of the Ustaše were over. As the war drew to a close, there was an attempt at retribution and reconciliation. The architect of the Ustaše ideology, Mile Budak, was tried in Zagreb along with a number of his former employees. The trial lasted a single day, and Budak, along with 6 others, were executed by Tito's partisans the following day. But this represents only a small portion of those responsible. Some, including Pavelić, were able to flee. Pavelić himself fled to Italy and then to South America, where an attempt was made on his life. After being granted asylum in fascist Spain, he lived out his remaining years in Europe before dying aged 70 due to complications from the gunshot he had received during his attempted assassination several years earlier. Even with Pavelić dead, the legacy of the Ustaše remained. Their brutal form of Croatian nationalism would rear its head once again as Yugoslavia broke apart in 1991. The shadows of this grim chapter of Balkan history continue to loom large to this day. Anyways guys, we hope you learned something new from this one, and let us know what topics you'd like to see next, and whether you want more brutal ones like this, or videos focused on things a little less gut-wrenching. Let us know below, and hope to see you in the next one.